they don't even have to work at their
Kind of like
jobs. It's
the
weird.
smart water that's like.
I know, like how.
Battle.
And
I'm like, by
wait a minute.
drinking this,
and nobody checks to see
Right,
if it's
right.
even
by
sanitized.
drinking this, am I going to become smart?
I hope so. That's what. I'm gonna be flowing.
$10 I have, $10 I have expectations.
Yeah.
Right.
It's fiscally irresponsible, whether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I bought one of those when they first came out because it was a glass bottle and I
Mm-hmm.
used the same glass bottle for like 4
Oh, the
years.
Voss?
Yes, the
Did you like
Voss. And then when, actually not her, I
Hello?
keep calling her my first daughter's name, poor fourth born kid. But our firstborn was carrying the carrier to the car and I dropped the Voss and it like shattered all over the ground. I'm like, man. And I'm thinking like, I didn't get enough mileage out of that even still after 4 years. Like, but these kids, the demands are crazy.
So that you had to buy an $80 bottle.
Oh, I would never buy it. My niece was telling me like why she had to have it and she got it. And I'm just like. this
80,
is-
was it really $80?
Oh, yeah. I don't know what it did. Maybe it kept it cold
Does it-
for the rest of your life. I'm not sure.
I'm like, does it drink water for it?
Yes, you absolutely become hydrated.
I mean, if
23 meeting of the Ohio Elections Commission to order. Mr. Richter, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Lyle. Here. Ms. Hagan,
Present.
Mr. Knight. Here. Mr. Kolke. Here. Mr. Caraway,
Here,
Vice Chair Tavares.
Here.
Chair Kaufman.
Here. So everyone is present. At this time, I believe that everyone has the meeting minutes. Give me a minute to get back into my swing of May 25th meeting, and had a chance to review. Corrections have been made. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Second. Okay, we have a motion on the floor that's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 6-0. Since I'm abstaining since I wasn't here. Okay. So the first order of business is a reconsideration. That is Edwards versus One Worthington, case number 2021G-020. Now we have council president
Yep.
to represent. So,
Madam Chair, can I make a comment before we begin?
Yes.
This case, so, particularly for the new board members, but, I actually find it troubling that we're potentially going to reconsider this case, for many reasons. As you know, the previous board made a determination on this. And this case has languished for a good 14 months. And I don't think it's proper that we're gonna reconsider this on a lot of levels, which I will get into. But for 14 months, I mean, we now are gonna have a new board that's gonna make a determination to either go forward with this case or dismiss this case. And there was a lot of discussion on this case that we had. And as I recall, it wasn't unanimous, but it was split. It was, I remember Mr. Kreitz siding with the majority on this case. And all we said was we thought that there was probable cause. I believe, Chair, you and, I could be wrong, but I believe you and Chair Beatty at the time voted in the negative, which is fine. I'm just trying to refresh everybody's memory on this. But the board had made that determination based on a lot of discussion. And I think that, I think it's bad policy actually for us to do this. We already have a situation, as we all know, where we can't go through our cases. We have a backlog. Many of them end up being dismissed because we can't handle them. And now I think we really have to think about what we're doing potentially here. Because this is now, since it's never been done, as Bill had stated in comments to us, and what it's gonna do, it's gonna open the door for reconsideration. I know that Mr. McTighe is not opposed to that. All due respect to Mr. McTighe, I don't think that's for consideration for this board. Really doesn't matter if he thinks we should go, we should hear it or we shouldn't, or he doesn't have a problem with it. What's important, in my opinion, is that this board makes a determination with respect to policy, and if we're gonna go forward with it. I mean, the problem is what should have happened, which didn't. And I'm not trying to beat Phil up, but, I've talked to Phil about this, so but he knows this, but what should have happened was that Mr. Bray, at least what I could see in the materials, he did send a letter to Mr. Richter and said he didn't have an opportunity to be here. He didn't get the mail. I understand that. The problem is we didn't hear that case in May. We didn't hear that case in June. We didn't hear that case in July, and it's languished for 14 months. And now the new board is going to make a determination. The other thing I would underscore, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't recall in this group of material that we received that we then received material for the Worthington case. And we did prior, okay? But for us to think 14, 15 months ago and to remember this case with all the detail, knowing that there was serious consideration given and much discussion by this board, that we found probable cause to go to hearing, it puts us, I believe, at a disadvantage. And Bill was in opposition to the board. Not saying anything he hasn't told us, but he wanted us to dismiss this case. The board voted to take this case forward. And I don't think that Bill's position at this point, where it's front and center, should be the priority. I think the priority of this case is the decision that this board made. And for all those reasons, I would ask that we don't go forward this, that that a decision has been made and that we hear the case and both parties can make their arguments and go forward. And then this board, after having all the material in front of them and having a chance to review the material, which they haven't, unless I'm wrong, and if I am, I apologize, that there was a lot of material with this case. So this is not a regular reconsideration, like when we have reconsiderations, our ICWs. This is a very involved case. And anyway, for those reasons, I don't think we should go forward. I believe we should stay with the prior board's decision. So I just wanted to say that before we go forward.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have?
Madam Chair, the only comment that I would have, and it posed it in the form of a question to Mr. Richter. It is a little concerning to me that counsel for the respondent was not present at the original preliminary review. I understand that, things happen. So I would ask Mr. Richter, Mr. Bry did not receive notice of the date. Is that, has that happened before in a matter before the commission?
Not that I can recall or think of, no. This was I would say a rare occurrence. I apologize. Mr. Lyle and I had a conversation about this yesterday. I respect his position. I understand it. But no, and as I indicated, when I talked to him and as I'll say now, when I look back into the file, I would normally, were such an occurrence to be made, when I look back into the file and I can see something that reflected that we did get service or something along those lines, or we at least tried to put notice out there. I'd have a different take on this, but there was nothing in the file that indicated that. So how that got overlooked for a better term, I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
But under that set of circumstances, that's why I decided to bring it back. I should have brought it back earlier. First off, I was considering whether even to bring it back, considering some of the comments Mr. Lyle just made. And it kind of got lost in the shuffle. And I apologize to the commission for that. There's no real excuse for it. But it is what occurred. And so to my knowledge, this has never really occurred before that I can think of, where notice didn't get out to someone that should have gotten information about it. So that's not a great answer, but it's the best answer I have.
Madam Chairman, I have an opportunity to address just the motion of reconsider, not the merits of the previous.
Correct.
Sure. Yes.
Sorry, he's looking at me.
As people have noted, I appeared as counsel for the respondent. And I did not receive notice of the April 20th hearing. So I wasn't there when I found out about it within a couple of weeks. On May 3rd, 2022. I filed a written motion to reconsider and set a new preliminary review. I wasn't responsible for the schedule, but I would respectfully suggest that the decision that was made on April 21, 2022 is not a lawful decision because it was not a lawful hearing. As a matter of this rule, the rules of this commission, the statute requires reasonable notice at a reasonable time of what you're being accused of and an opportunity to be there. The rules of this commission say the same thing, that they're required. You're required by law to give notice to counsel who has appeared. I did not receive notice. And I respect, Don McTighe and I have been opposed in a lot of things. We've been allied in some issues as well. I respect him. He is probably the best the Democrats have in terms of his lawyers. He's got good character and he's a fantastic advocate. But even a poor advocate can be much more persuasive. There's nobody to argue on the other side. And there was nobody to argue on the other side of April 21, 2022. And I would suggest that what happened on April 21, 2022, the board thought it was making a lawful decision, that notice had been given and people were there. They had an opportunity to be there. They had an opportunity to present their arguments and I just didn't show up. I've never done that before, by the way. You know, in 40 years I've been before this commission, 4 decades. And I wasn't planning on doing it then. I was actually checking in to say, well, when is this going to be set? And found out it had already been set and a hearing had been scheduled. That's not what due process looks like. That is not a lawful act of this commission. The motion to reconsider and say, okay, we'll have a do-over and allow arguments from both sides on the preliminary review is an opportunity for this commission to correct a mistake. I'm not blaming anybody. I don't know how it happened. I'm sure Phil doesn't know how it happened, but it happened. That notice was not given to someone who had a statutory and constitutional right to notice. That deprives us of our due process. It severely prejudices us. I'm sympathetic to the notion that, gee, this has been going on for a long time, but I didn't do that. I don't get to set the schedules. I do have some input and I appreciate that. But the reality is the fact that we filed this motion over a year ago and we're just now hearing it is not something that should prejudice me or my client. I believe we have a right, a legal right to have a legal hearing with proper notice. You know, we were willing to go forward today. We've done, Mike McTighe and I talked about that. I was surprised to learn that the commission members don't have what they need to go forward today. And I will obviously defer to the commission on whether they want to have a preliminary review argument today or some other time. That's not, you know, whether I said it your call or not, it is your call. But as to whether or not there should be a setting aside of the decision and then a decision with both sides present the best shot, I think that's something we're entitled to, and that's why I've asked for it.
Thank you. Commissioners have questions,
Um,
comments?
no, I have comments, I guess. So I would say it's hard to argue with Mr. Bray, given what he said, if he did get notice. And I take the man at his word since he has been here for what, 30 years or more.
Since the 1980s.
So that's, okay. I'm at a time or two, don't feel, I don't understand this. That he's never missed a meeting and not appeared at a meeting, okay? But if we're gonna go forward with it, I think then we should have a motion that says, because I am concerned about opening the door with reconsideration. But I think we should make a motion that says only if the respondent was not given proper notice, so it's noted, so not, you know, every attorney in the world is gonna come and say, you reconsidered this case. And we can say, well, if we do that, then we did reconsider it based on no notice. Okay, I mean, can't argue with the man on that. I mean, it is what it is. So, and as I said, I don't know him, but I take him at his word that he didn't receive it, so.
Madam Chair. So, I mean, I completely agree to command his word. We should reconsider the caveats. My concern, and at the expense of, you know, extending this, as I recall, this case came with a lot of information and attachments, and there were affidavits from Mr. Bray's client around why they're not a PAC and what they do, and we didn't get that this time. All we really have is Phil's recommendation. I don't feel properly prepared, because if we were going to have a reconsideration, all of that should have been sent to us in advance so that we could be prepared. And I remember looking at the website and all kinds of stuff. I did that again today because I remember the case a bit, but I didn't go back to all of the stuff from several months ago. I mean, that should have been, if we were going to seriously consider reconsideration today, that should have been included in our packet, and it was not. So I'm personally uncomfortable and feel unprepared to go forward today. And I know that the council's here and it's been extended, but that, and again, that's on us, that's on our part. But I don't feel we're prepared for all the information to have a discussion today.
Madam Chairman, may I make a suggestion?
Well, can we finish?
Can I interject 1 second? I'm looking at an email where I thought I sent all this stuff out to you guys.
Yeah, there were attachments.
I've been through like all the attachments. I
I
don't,
was through mine. I didn't have any.
There was,
not from the
And
one Worthington side.
I print everything out. I mean, you know, you had a lot of material this time.
Right.
there were
My printer was
shots of
fine.
the website and
I mean,
There were series of affidavits from both
Right.
sides. There was all, I mean,
It
this
was-
was one of our
it's like-
bigger
yeah,
cases.
it was confusing.
Is today a full case hearing or recommendation or?
It's
This
a
is a
reconsideration.
preliminary.
Reconsideration on.
Yeah, we wouldn't be hearing the full case today.
We
But
would be
still
deciding whether or not, and the decision before was to move forward to a hearing. And it was based on the wealth of information that we reviewed. And we, as I recall, we kind of said, and I respect that, you know, about half or so we're not here. But as I recall, one of the overriding themes was if we could hear the other side, we could ask questions on a number of these things that,
Review the budgets.
right?
Yeah.
And you weren't, that's not your fault. But like now I kind of feel we're gonna be waited on another side, and I don't know what Mr. McTighe has to present. I just don't.
There's a
review all
motion
these
to
things.
dismiss
Is the first motion.
right, yeah, so, I mean, that's a pretty significant.
Yeah, I just have one comment because I have a lot of concerns and I think I don't want to repeat them, but what I did, since I didn't have all the kind of the wealth of information in front of us, I went back at least to look at the minutes. I know Mr. Lau indicated that it was split, but at least when I read it, it looks like it was a unanimous decision by this board.
Oh, okay.
It was.
Well, see, it's hard to
So,
recall 14 months.
Those are the things that kind of brought it up to a concern of mine that with all the information and that discussion being reached. So I just wanted to share that because it sounded like the board went through did its due diligence and came to a decision. And I respect exactly what you're saying around that. But I did not have kind of all that information, the affidavits and anything. So.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, maybe we could have the executive director, particularly because I'm new, I need to understand, so we would be asked to make a motion to reconsider the previous decision to move forward for a full hearing, correct? That's what's before us.
Correct,
Then the motion to dismiss after that, correct?
correct.
The motion to reconsider is actually a motion to vacate what was done on April 21 or whatever it is. And to then have a new preliminary review, at which you could do exactly the same thing that you did before, or you could do something different. So in other words, it's a start over. It's not, we're not asking in the motion to reconsider that you say, and now we're going to grant a dismissal, or now we're going to say you don't have a hearing. That's something that's for the argument either today or at another time on the motion to dismiss and the complaint on the merits of the preliminary review.
Okay.
Thank you. I would like to give Mr. McTighe an opportunity to speak as well.
Thank you, Don McKay, on behalf of the complainant, Marcia Edwards. So with regard to the motion to reconsider what Mr. Bray has just said is a correct summation of really what's before the commission, which is to reconsider the previous finding that there was probable cause to set it for a hearing. It's to vacate that and then move on to decide again whether or not there's probable cause. We were both prepared to move on to that today, okay, because nothing has changed. There's been no new filings, no new evidence, anything like that. But if now I'm concerned from what I've heard, especially with new members, and even some of the members that were on the panel before, you don't have all the documents. And it is a very kind of fact intensive decision involving what I said the first time is that this is a precedent-setting legal question about when do you cross that line into having a major or primary purpose of influencing elections. There's no guidance in Ohio law, no guidance in prior cases from the commission. And so I think it is important. First of all, I think it's important that we go to an evidentiary hearing, but we are right now at this procedural step of entertaining the motion to vacate the earlier finding and then have a do-over of the preliminary review, which could be today or it could be later. But I do have some concerns now about doing it today based on what I've heard. I did not oppose the motion to vacate. I did not support it either, but I did what lawyers do often, take no position, neither support nor oppose. Because I certainly took Mr. Bray at his word. Right. Now they know me do it.
They're rolling here.
40 years, you got your name right.
Just don't call me McDermott. So, I really don't expect that things will change, but I understand the argument about due process. But again, on behalf of my client, we're not taking a position on the motion to vacate and move forward.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, perhaps for efficiency's sake, I would recommend that we might consider vacating the case with the recognition that we could still arrive at the exact same conclusion. So I don't think it would harm us to set the hearing and give us the opportunity to gather all the files and have all the files to review before actually allowing this dialogue to transpire. It's just my personal observation, but I'm interested in the opinion of the full commission.
I agree with that.
I also agree with that.
I would just add again, the reason that we're
Sure.
reconsidering it is because there was not proper notice.
Yeah,
for Mr.
Yeah.
Bry.
and make sure that's part of the record.
Right, so we.
I think that would need to be part of the motion. Mr. Richter, do you have any comments?
No additional comments, no.
So any further comments or questions from the commission? Okay. Hearing no comments, no questions. Do we have a motion?
I'll move the motion that we vacate the previous finding, that we set it for a preliminary hearing. And in addition to that, that we underscore that the only reason we're vacating this is because proper notice was not served on Mr. Bray. I know that's lengthy, if you want to shorten it.
Do we want to do that to a date certain so that we have this, to Mr. Bright's point, this has been in the system for quite a while.
Yeah, I have no
So-
problem.
My suggestion would be August 10th. Because Don, I know Mr. Bry is unavailable on July 20th, which is the next meeting. And so it then becomes, are you aware of what your
I'll be in
schedule
North
is?
Carolina, August.
Okay, then there's August, I think it was August 10th, wasn't it? It is August 24th, I think,
24th, I believe.
31st.
or the 31st.
August 31st wouldn't work though.
Second.
Oh, that's right, you guys were,
Yeah.
that's right.
Couple of people absent.
September 14th, I think is the next one, is that?
I'll tell you in just a second.
Were we
We
moving
just
the August
here to
meeting?
state the calendars permit.
We canceling that August 31st meeting?
Right now, no, but we could. How's that
Yeah,
for-
I'm not gonna be here.
Right.
So there will be two members absent that
Right.
day, right?
So the 14th.
September 13th.
September 14 and then
September
September
14th.
20th.
Yeah.
Does that work for the commission? Does that work for
Does that work for?
both council?
Yeah,
Works for me.
Which date?
September 14th.
if it's okay with Mr. McTighe.
I'm trying to get to that. I'm also somewhat technologically challenged. Can't even say a word.
You're in good company.
Yeah, so the 14th of September. Yeah, that looks good.
Okay,
Okay.
so can we add that into the motion? Or do we?
Sure, we can, so I'd make a motion that we would vacate the previous finding. We would move the hearing, I'm sorry, we would move this case to a preliminary hearing. And the date will be September 14th, 2023.
I have a question on the motion.
Yes, thank you. And
With
I'm
the,
sorry,
Is it a preliminary review or a hearing?
Preliminary review.
Okay, he's a preliminary
Did I
hearing,
say
so I'm trying to make sure.
I meant review.
Okay, preliminary, okay, that's fine.
And that we would then add the caveat about, you know, due process was not afforded, or proper notice was not afforded in this particular case. I think that would.
Second.
Mr. Knight, did you still have a question or? did-
Oh, no, I was playing with the baby.
Duly
He
noted.
isn't transferring you.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor that's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. Thank you for your patience on that. Walking us through it all.
did the baby vote?
I'm sorry.
Did the baby vote?
You said,
Kind of dual.
She's not reflected in the minutes.
Not to be counted as half a vote or half a person.
Okay.
Styles.
The first.
I still have that like knee jerk reaction. I want to raise my hand.
There eventually.
If we're having audio visual issue or audio.
She's right.
Okay.
And I'm gonna no violation. Definitely. We're out of here.
We're gonna take the next case out of order. This one will be the no violation.
I was gonna say on page 7 under the group recommendations, the first group recommendation.
Regina Richards et al. 2023 R-176.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the commission, this is a referral from, I think, the Clark County Board of Elections for a, I think it was for a late, it's either a later failure to file the annual report. When the response was submitted by the respondent and their treasurer, it reflected a timely filing. And so my recommendation is to find no violation. We have here before us today candidate and one of the respondents, Regina Richards. If the commission would like to hear from her further, we can have her sworn. She can make a statement. But you now know my recommendation.
Would you like to make a statement?
Briefly.
Okay, then, Chris.
Oh, no, I guess it would be me. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please go ahead.
Thank you and good morning. I did travel here from Clark County today. On the way here, I was informed that there was a recommendation for no violation. And I would respectfully ask the commissioners to accept that recommendation and finalize the matter forthwith. And I took the matter very seriously because I worked very hard on my campaign and so did my treasurer. And we were really confused when we got the letter. Because usually in Clark County, that you just go to Clark County, the local board, and they say, and there's a meeting there and you would find out. So it was wonderful to come down here. I'm originally from Franklin County and meet you distinguished commissioners and the baby. And thank you, but I would respectfully ask that you accept that recommendation and finalize the matter so I can get back to work. Thank you very much.
Any questions of commissioners?
I'll move the executive director's recommendation.
Sorry, jump.
No,
in.
you're fine.
All right, we do have a motion that's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Safe
much.
travels back. Then the next matter on the agenda is a preliminary review, Gomez versus Lee. I said that correct.
Yep.
And all 2023G-003.
That matter has been withdrawn, Madam Chair, and so it's on the agenda only because we have it here. Easier to just go ahead and acknowledge the withdrawal. So, you acknowledge the withdrawal, that matter is
And that
resolved,
complaint has been withdrawn.
correct?
So, the next case on the agenda is 2023D-005, and I'm not going to say the names because I don't want to butcher, but Mr. Rishi.
Rasmussen v. Pappas. We got a response on that the other day, and when I sent out updated materials last evening, you had an opportunity to have some of those materials. I'm recommending that we continue that to July 20th. And so that's the recommendation on the case right at the moment. And we'll see what kind of comments are made at the 20th meeting as it relates to that case and another case that council will be representing the parties, different parties on another matter.
Okay, so I should just continue that.
Yeah, you can continue that as
Okay.
well.
That will be continued to the July 20th, 2023 meeting. The next case is Marietta versus Union Township for Public Safety, case number 2021G-024.
This was a complaint too that kind of got lost with the other one, and I need to apologize to the commission for having it take so long, but regardless, in the intervening period, materials were filed. I guess you'd say in abundance of caution, the Board of Election accepted all those materials, and the respondent, Union Township for Public Safety, which was the only respondent before us, has terminated. The Board of Election allowed them to terminate. I looked at all the reports and they were all in compliance. And so my recommendation is just to dismiss this case as the respondent has been properly terminated with the Board of Elections. That will take action by the commission. I'll be glad to answer any other questions that the commission may have.
Any questions by commission members?
I'll move the recommendation of the executive director.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor that's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next case is P. Green v. Citizens for Change Pact et al., case number 2021G-011.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I'm recommending that case be consolidated with the next case on the agenda, 2021G-012, as well as 2022R-581. The first two cases, and Mr. McTighe is here on behalf of the complainant, Mr. T. Green, alleged various violations by Citizens for Change PAC. While those were outstanding, we had a referral from the Board of Elections that the commission was ready to address in April. A response was submitted in that case. All reports have been submitted to the Board of Elections. And so my understanding, at least, is that the group Citizens for Change is in compliance with the statutes. Rather than deal with just the one, I thought it appropriate to consolidate all these matters together. Give Mr. McTighe an opportunity to appear before the commission if he has any other arguments to be made. But my recommendation is to consolidate all three of these cases, find that there has been a violation of the statute, and impose a fine of $100.
Mr. McLean.
Thank you. Don McTighe, on behalf of the complainant, Joe T. Green. So, first of all, regarding the referral by the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, I wasn't even aware of that until I saw the agenda for this meeting, that there had been a referral. Consequently, I also just learned that there was some kind of a response and reports filed with the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. I'm not really sure that those are appropriate. The complaint that we filed was for failure to file reports with the Secretary of State. This is a federal committee. This is a federal political action committee that registered with the Secretary of State a couple of days after we filed the first complaint, saying they had failed to register. So then they registered with the Secretary of State. So under Ohio law, you are required thereafter, during any federal reporting period where you had activity in connection with non-federal Ohio elections, to file a copy of your FEC report with the Secretary of State. I checked last night on the Secretary of State's website, and nothing has been filed. No reports have been filed with the Secretary of State. I'm not sure what they filed with the Cuyahoga County Board. Because that's, board shouldn't even really be accepting federal reports. You know, I think that the law is set up in Ohio so that there is this transparency at the state level for federal committees to file online with the Secretary of State so that you can look it up easily. You know, I would humbly suggest that that case, the referral from the board, not be consolidated with the two complaints that we have filed. First of all, our complaints are much more extensive than the referral by the Board of Elections. And I can go through those, but you know, just as a preliminary matter, I am opposed to consolidating the county referral with the two complaints that Mr. T-Green filed. I also think that what I would assume, if I can say this, well, I assume that maybe Phil, you can correct me, but in the two cases that my client filed, which contain extensive documentation about the anti-Dennis Kucinich campaigning that was done when Dennis Kucinich was running for mayor. There's all kinds of campaigning done without any disclosure in terms of finance reports. There was a disclaimer, which is what allowed us to file a complaint. The disclaimer, one of the complaints, I'm just going to argue these two complaints together since I'm asking for them to be consolidated. But the first complaint was about not registering the federal committee. They were out there spending all kinds of money. They hadn't registered the federal committee. A few days, as I said, a few days after we filed the complaint, and there were newspaper articles, because I don't even think they had actually gotten the complaint from the commission yet. But there were newspaper articles, then they registered a few days later with the Secretary of State. But that's a late registration. Okay, so the failure to register now turns into a late registration with the Secretary of State. We also alleged that they failed to file any reports with the Secretary of State regarding the expenditures and the contributions received and expenditures made. The disclaimer regarding the disclaimer violation, we also allege that that these are independent expenditures. And they do not comply with the Ohio law for independent expenditures, where you have to say not coordinated with any candidate or candidates committee. There's a lot of suspicion about whether there was coordination. Okay, we don't have evidence of that, but there was a lot of speculation with all this money being spent in a very hotly contested mayoral primary election that this may not be truly independent, but they were claiming to be independent, at least I believe in some articles. And so they didn't comply with the disclaimer provisions. With all due respect to the recommendation of $100, if you want to oppose $100 on the, I don't really care what you do with the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections referral. Okay, if you think $100 is good enough there, fine, but that's not my case. My case is about the failure to file with the Secretary of State, which they were clearly required to do. so that there would be disclosure. If you have the complaint, or the complaints in front of you, you can quickly see that there was a website, there were numerous mailings, there was social media, all basically blasting Dennis Kucinich, telling people to vote no. There's no question this was express advocacy. So in order to really get to a resolution in a case, it should be set for a hearing. Which brings me back to another point I was going to make, why these two cases should not be consolidated. Not a single response has been filed in the two cases I filed here, right, that Mr. Teagle filed. These are cases with not a single response. That, and with the amount of evidence that we've produced, those should be set for a hearing. Okay, how can you even decide what the appropriate level of penalty would be if you're fined a violation when not any response has been filed? So I would respectfully urge that you not consolidate the Cuyahoga case, that you do consolidate the two complaints that Mr. T. Green filed, and that you vote to set the T. Green cases for a hearing. Try to answer questions.
Commissioners have questions. Mr. McTighe?
And my question may be for Mr. Richter rather than for the complainant. The Cuyahoga County Board matter. Can you go into a little detail, because I don't remember seeing that. I obviously reviewed the stuff that was in your email, Mr. Richter, but I'm not sure that I have a recollection of the local Board of Elections filing. And what would they have been filing? At the county
It was
board?
bear with me. Give me a second.
It said we file a DOT at the local board.
Right.
For a state.
It was for, initially at least, a failure to file the 2021 annual report. Subsequently, that report was filed according to the board. When the ICW is here, it was filed on June 9th, 2022. A response was submitted to that. And so obviously a group was set up there. I mean, I appreciate Mr. McTighe's comments as it relates to, the original allegations here. It was just my belief that they took care of all their responsibilities in terms of filing as a PAC, establishing themselves, subsequently, filing the annual report, even though it was late. And so I believe that took into consideration all what here. I appreciate what he's saying. I didn't realize that I realized that there was the difference between his two complaints and the other. But I thought that the actions by Citizens for Change essentially took care, for want of a better phrase, took care of all that. They took care of their filings. They reflected the activity that they've had. And so that was my reason for essentially bringing these together at this point. And recommending that they all be consolidated, because they did take action, they did file reports, and they did reflect their activity. So, that's, and all of those materials, I believe, were sent to everybody in advance.
Well, not everybody.
I'm looking at an email that I sent to you on May 23rd that included the response that Mr. Wilson submitted. I'm sorry?
You're saying the response on the Cuyahoga board?
The response that was submitted in that case, I sent it to you on May 23rd. And I also sent you the docket sheets. You asked for the docket sheets on these cases.
Right,
The next day I sent
I
that,
don't remember the.
I sent that to you at that point.
Well, I think that still fundamentally, these are separate cases, and the bottom line is no response has been filed in either of the cases we find filed.
I just had a comment. I don't know if it's a question. One of the things that stuck out to me is when I read the affidavit from Mr. Wagner. there was no response to anything. It was simply, we've terminated the PAC. And so a lot of the questions I had about the complaint, the legitimacy of how that, I think went unanswered because we didn't have a response, like we sometimes get in other cases. You know, one of the other concerns that I had, and this may be getting a little further ahead, is one of the issues here was about the disclosure piece. And I know in the last couple meetings, you know, we had a issue before us with the Secretary of State where we imposed a $50 fine for a disclosure violation. Then last month we had we upped fine quite significantly based on a phone call, which really didn't have disclosure at all. And I think that addresses a lot here. So there seems to be some, in my mind at least, some inconsistencies about how we're doing that. This case stuck out to me because there was no response at all to the disclosure piece, and that raised a lot of concerns for me. So I'm not real comfortable with kind of the response or where we're at with in terms of the recommendation.
On that point, Madam Chair, would you like to keep the cases separated as opposed to combining them?
I really hadn't thought about it till I heard it this morning. It does make sense. No, I think that actually the two T-Green cases could be combined. The board case, I think,
Should be
makes sense,
separate.
should be separate.
And we could, in theory, dispense the board case today. Right? And then move forward on the consolidated two
T-Green.
cases, the T-Green. Right?
So any other questions or comments? We have a motion.
See, I would like to figure out how that's worded. So if any board commission member can help me with that, I would like to see if at least combine the two T-Green cases and move forward on those. And I think to Mr. Carraway's point, if we separate out the board, we could also make a motion to, I don't know whether that's the $100 fine or whatever that is regarding that. So that's kind of where my head is right now.
That would be
So-
case number 2023 G004.
Twenty 2021 G011 and 012
Are the-
are the two T.
Yeah, 11 and
Right.
12 are the federal, the
Then the one that you would like to.
581.
Is it 581 that is?
No way.
22 are filing.
Excuse me. 2022 R-581 is what you would like to
Separate.
So,
separate.
If you make the motion, I'll second.
so I know I kind of spoke to it, so is it okay if make the motion? I'd like to make the motion that we separate 2022 R-581 from 2021 G-11 and -12. And should I recommend the imposition of the $100 fine?
I would make it a separate motion.
Okay.
So you want to separate that and consolidate those two, and consolidate 2021 G011 and
So
20.
you just consolidate, they're already separate. You need-
Yeah, they're not,
Yeah, you just consolidate the two T-Greens, that's all the motion needs to be.
because the recommendation of
They're
it.
already three separate, you don't need to make a motion to separate,
Gotcha.
just a motion.
That's why I was looking for conditions.
Just a motion to
Consolidate this, yes,
consolidate the two.
Move those to
except for hearing.
set for hearing. Okay.
Second.
So. Okay. We have a motion. Does everyone understand the motion? Okay, so the motion has been made. We have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries with a vote of 7-0. And we have addressed all three, correct? Or
Yeah.
just two?
Madam Chair,
That's
to accept the original recommendation on the independent case, sorry, it was
2022 R-581.
581, yeah.
But
Yes, as recommended for the $100 fine.
But that was a consolidated recommendation. We don't have an individual recommendation unless Phil's going to make one. Mr.
So the Commissioner Zach is making a motion to impose a $100 fine
Are
then.
you making that?
Violation, was a fine of $100.
I
We
will,
have a motion.
I'll second that.
We have a motion that's,
I had some discussion. I mean, I was thinking through the recommendation given as a combination, so I would like to hear from the executive director if as a single case by itself, he still feels that's appropriate.
Yes.
any other questions or comments? He agrees. Okay, so having heard Mr. Richter's recommendation, the motion still stands. So all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries with a vote of 7-0. So, thank you.
Mr. Richter, is that common that we would not have any type of a response from a respondent on?
It happens. I mean, that's the best answer I can.
And
Is it a bit out of the ordinary?
we had no
Yeah.
issues with service?
No.
Thank you. Okay, the next case on the agenda is Alan B. Plowman et al. 2023 G-004. You don't have anyone?
Mr. Allen is here. What are you?
My name's Tom Mead. I had a hearing at your Cedric Penn, just late finding parking.
What case? Because there was a sign up sheet and you came in late.
Yeah, I was at the time she's.
That's okay. What's the case?
Say
number?
Mead, his last name?
Mead, yes.
Case, it's under the $100 fine category, 2023 R-181.
181. Okay.
We'll be with you then in just a moment.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Richter, do you want to do a review? Or?
This is the case where the complainant asserts that the respondents have raised funds and acted like a PAC without filing the required designation of treasurer. Additionally, the complainant asserts that the respondents have used portions of the funds raised through a GoFundMe account for personal reasons in violation of 3517.13.0. We've received various responses from some of the responses. I've outlined them for everybody there in terms of the arguments that they've made. Primarily, I think most critically, the Weber response indicating that she created the Facebook page individually and was not intended as an organized group. Explains the reason that the group was created and no real political purpose. Even though she did talk about having certain, she reported information about fundraisers. Various other individuals, Mr. Wagner, Plowman, Carroll, and Garber all responded and stated, that they didn't receive any monies from that. Oh, and also that Weber stated that the money that was raised through the GoFundMe account was done for the purposes of the legal challenge this is all involving a amphitheater up in northwestern Ohio. And so my recommendation, and as I looked at the materials, with all due respect to Mr. Allen, he'll be able to make his comments. I didn't see anything that led me to believe that the activities here were for an electoral purpose. They were all related to opposing the amphitheater and making payments for the legal challenge to the circumstances. So my recommendation is to find a violation. Certainly, I'll swear in Mr. Allen here in a second, and he can make an additional statement that you can take into consideration. Mr. Allen, do you swear or affirm that what you are about to tell the commission is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Yes, as Mr. Richter stated, this organization formed itself on or around August or September of last year in regards to the local city council passing an ordinance for a proposed amphitheater in our community. Their sole purpose is opposition of this amphitheater. Shortly after they formed, they designated Ms. Weber as their treasurer, and they set about raising money through that online organization that they made. They made a GoFundMe page, which to date has raised over $16,000. And shortly after receiving the notification from this organization that there was going to be at least a preliminary hearing, Ms. Weber went online and started telling people to stop donating to the GoFundMe page because it was being noted, and to start writing checks to her directly. So the questions that we have from the community are basically around this organization in and of itself. They call themselves option either Waterville Citizens Against the Amphitheater or Not in My Backyard. The GoFundMe page that they raised states very specifically that the funds were being raised for the legal defense of Waterville citizens against the amphitheater. They then take the money and give it to Tim Plowman for a private lawsuit against the city of Waterville, Mr. Plowman and Mr. Harrell. We don't know what they've spent the money on specifically. When I bring up the issue of them being a ballot committee, which is what my argument is, because they've also run 2 separate referendums against ordinances in the city through this organization where they petition citizens in the city. They've run 2 separate attempts to recall sitting elected officials through this organization. Their motives and their organization is without question political in nature. And a lot of this, I'm not an attorney, so when I wrote the complaint, I wasn't sure how to put all of this in there, so my apologies. But I think the most notable thing that I came across after filing that was a comment from Ms. Weber online in a Facebook page where one of the people in their own organization states that it doesn't seem right. Where is the money being deposited? Was a special account set up? Was all of these things done? Things that as a candidate for state senate, I knew that I had to do when I ran for the state senate. Things that all candidates, all these other organizations have to do when they become politically motivated within their communities. Lisa's answer was very telling. It says, when this first started, we didn't have time to form what we thought we would have needed for it at that time. And to this date, all of the money goes into a private account in Lisa's name. I have to assume she's not claiming taxes on that money or filing her tax returns on that because it's income for her as an individual at this point, regardless of how she's taking it in and then doling it out to Mr. Plowman and Mr. Harrell for their private lawsuit. And that's the crux of what we have here is the problem. They're an inexperienced group of people that got together that want to fight an amphitheater. And while I applaud their ability and their zeal to fight the amphitheater, I'm not necessarily again in favor of it or against it myself, which they find funny when I said it. But the reality is they've raised to date now over $20,000 that we're aware of. And they're still raising money and spending it as quickly as they can. And it's having a very significant impact on our community on the current election cycle. Because the 4 candidates are key to the central, this Not in My Backyard organization. When they have candidate nights, it's just their candidates. When they have the organization itself does things, they exclude members of the community from that, myself and other candidates, council members, etc. So they're very exclusive in who they want to be involved in, and who they will allow to even speak within their organization. Jeff has the person that questioned how they were doing the money as one of their own people. They actually exclude him from all their conversations now because they don't like the questions that he asks. It's uncomfortable for them. So while I understand what Ms. Weber's statement is that somehow or another it would be convenient if we could say every group of concerned citizens that gets together and isn't necessarily politically motivated, but suddenly starts running not 1, but 2 referendums, additional recall efforts, filing lawsuits against the city, and then all of a sudden, four of them spontaneously just decide to start running for political office in our community. I think that's a bit much to ask for anybody to believe. I don't think there's any question that there are at the very least a ballot committee, because of the two referendums they're running. I have here the campaign finance handbook, and in chapter 9 of that, which is where I pulled most of my information from the Secretary of State's office, it very clearly states that running a referendum makes their organization a ballot committee or a ballot PAC. And they are then, because of the monies they raise through that organization, subject to the rules of a political action committee.
Madam Chair, Mr. Plowman, you said
That's
Mr. Allen, I'm sorry. You said that this committee, this group, do they have a name at all?
Not in my backyard is the current name they're going by. They change it whenever, whenever they get a little too tight with things, they change the name. It started out as Waterville Citizens Against the Amphitheater, which is what the GoFundMe was founded under. And then not long after, there's a nationwide thing kind of called Not in My Backyard, or NIMBY, that's kind of pervasive in communities around the country, and they kind of adopted that name later on. And I've got multiple things from their Facebook page and their community stuff where they've had meetings where they've reserved community centers for meetings. They discuss their fundraising, funding, raising funds for candidates. Now they're looking at things like that. While they may not have donated to candidates, they certainly discuss how are we going to go about supporting these four people and raising money for our candidates.
And then, Madam Chair, second question, Mr. Allen. Ms. Weber says that the group is comprised of about 900 members. Do you know how she keeps?
That's their current membership on their Facebook page,
Okay,
which is
Okay.
the main page they use. They have a web page, they have a GoFundMe page, and then they have a Facebook page where they get most of their information, but it's an exclusive Facebook page. It actually lists itself as a political group on Facebook. They list themselves as
Facebook.
political in nature.
so the Facebook page, Ms. Weber, who created it,
Yes,
is listing that as a political organization.
yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a few questions for Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen, good morning.
Thank you.
So a Facebook group, for example, I don't necessarily believe that individuals, constituents of a community being part of a Facebook group necessarily is political activity. However, do you know if the group, Not in My Backyard or Citizens for Waterville, or, whatever they're called, have they done any kind of vote against or vote for or advocacy on, telling the electorate in mass communication, or, however they would communicate with the constituents there? Have they done any of that? Any signs,
Yes.
Okay,
They do a lot of door to door.
okay,
To the point where members of the community have started putting things in their windows that say, I'm not going to sign, don't even knock. Because they do this on a regular basis. They go door to door for their referendums against the amphitheater. They talk about their four candidates. Their four candidates now have signage that they've created that says for Waterville: Harold, Plowman, Garver, and Mr. I can't remember who it is.
Wagner.
Thank you, Wagner. So they definitely go out in the community. They have business locations, they have stickers on cars, they have things that they put in the community that says, stop the amphitheater, don't, vote against this, don't, vote for our candidates. We're gonna do this. This is how we're gonna behave. We're gonna stop all of this.
Madam Chair, follow up. The other concerning part for me was the GoFundMe page. However, I think citizens can go fund me or collectively fundraise for a cause, which in this case, I think would be legal fees to fight City Hall, so to speak.
Sure.
Do you, sir, know that if any of those funds have been used for advocacy purposes, as far as printing the literature to go door to door, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
Right now, I don't know because we haven't seen their books. They're keeping things private. They say if you show up at the meetings, they'll open the books to anybody, but when people like myself who are diametrically opposed to what their candidates stand for show up at the meetings, we're told we have to leave. So it's again, they're very exclusive. They want to say they're public, but they don't want anybody that disagrees with them to be anywhere near anything that they do. So.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions by commissioners?
Well, I appreciate what Mr. Allen was saying. I didn't see anything in any of the materials that reflected any kind of, electoral activity, let's put it that way. Certainly they're raising money. The responses that we got talked about paying money to lawyers for defense of the challenge to the presence of the amphitheater. But I didn't see any materials that said vote for this or vote for that. I didn't see anything else that was done in terms of electoral activity. Could you say there's political activity? Kinda. They talked about let's have meeting to raise funds for these folks. But all the responses came back from the candidates saying we never got any money. And they even included some elements of the campaign finance reports. Weber said that money was all used to pay for legal fees. And so based on the materials that are before us, that's my recommendation to find no violation. I'll be glad to answer any other questions the commission may have.
Mr. Richter, weren't we supplied with the checks for the legal fees?
I think the
I
answer to
can't
that,
find them
yeah.
right now. I'm
Yeah, we
looking
have
for them,
those.
but I remember reading them.
There were checks to one of the candidates' campaign committees, copies of those checks. And I noted because someone had not redacted the account numbers, the
Yeah,
blackout.
I
Yeah.
I thought in her initial,
In Weber's response,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
there were checks to the lawyers.
and do we know
They're in the back.
what the amounts were? Did we total those to say that money that they collected has been spent or hasn't?
I did not, no.
There's more.
Okay, that's, well, Ernie's. Figure that out before I was.
I mean, just. That's not thinking.
No. Go ahead.
It says plowman for water bill. Is he running for, what is plowman for water?
He's running for mayor.
He's running for mayor.
Yeah, those, I thought there were checks that she had written to the attorneys.
Mr. Lyle, I don't remember seeing those.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's.
Well, that's for the attorneys?
Yeah.
That's in Weber's response.
Okay.
That's what I thought, isn't it?
Okay.
Checking, yeah,
That
before.
was, yeah, that was, the longest
Right.
document that we received.
Fairness to
Yeah.
work.
I'm saying if we follow the money, if she did use all those funds for the attorney fees, I agree with Mr. Richter. If all those fees have not been used, and they were used political, I agree with Mr. Allen. So I think it's important to know what those funds are. And we have accounting of them is all I'm saying.
And the question becomes, where did those funds or those checks come from? Do they come from?
Is this what you're looking at? Was that-
No, there's plowman for water bill checks in his, like, 4 or 5.
Yeah, and I think that was, the way I read that was in Mr. Plowman's response was saying, here are the donations to my campaign committee thus far. And they matched up with the bank statement that he had also sent as his response. The amounts matched. But Mr. Allen didn't send those, the checks. I think they were in Mr. Plowman's response.
Yeah, I don't have access to any of that. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, you know, the confusion, I think, for a lot of the people in the community, and some of the people in city council is, you know, like I said, they're running referendum and they're clearly in that aspect, whether they're regardless of money, they're a political action, they're a ballot committee. If they're using that ballot committee to raise the money, which is what they're doing, that's the argument here that we have, is they're using their ballot committee to raise the money for the legal defense issue. This book specifically states in here that there's only 2 or 3 things that a ballot committee can use its funding for. None of it is for suing the city that you're running to be an elected official in. And that's where we're kind of confused, because while it may not necessarily be political as far as the funding is concerned, it is clear that their ballot committee is the one that's raising the money. It's gone through that page. It's everything they do is through that ballot committee, that Not in My Backyard organization. So per chapter 9 in here, they're raising the money. They've run 2 referendums. They're doing the things that a ballot committee does, trying to put things on the ballot. And now they go into this aspect of, we want to raise money and we want to sue the city of Waterville. The lawsuit doesn't state Waterville Citizens Against the Amphitheater versus the city of Waterville. And it doesn't state Not in My Backyard versus the city of Waterville. It states Tim Plowman versus the city of Waterville, which is an individual. It states specifically in here, you cannot convert funds raised by a ballot committee for personal use, for any other use. And that's where we're looking to say, okay, is there an issue here where they formed this committee, whether they agree with it or not? Anytime somebody tries to tell them they're a ballot committee, they actually kind of laugh about it. They don't take a lot of this very seriously until they actually got your thing. Like I said, as soon as they got the notification, they immediately changed gears and started saying, don't give to the GoFundMe anymore, write the checks directly to me. They don't have separate bank accounts set up. They don't have any of the things that committee would need to do in order to be correct. So what they're basically trying to get you to believe is, we formed a committee, we're running referendums, but we're raising the money through this committee in a different way. And Lisa's own statement, when this first started, we didn't have time to form what we would have needed to do for that, stating very clearly that she knew there was a right way to do it, that there was a proper way to do it, that she needed to set up a separate account that stated Waterville Citizens Against the Amphitheater, just like mine says Allen for Ohio when I ran for the Ohio Senate. So they failed to do that part, and now they're trying to say we didn't really need to because we had other intentions with all of this. And I think that's where everybody's kind of getting confused on the whole issue. You know, this is telling us one thing, and they've clearly formed that political action committee, that ballot pack, when they started running their referendums. And then when the lawsuits came along, they used that organization to raise the money to give to Tim Plowman to pay for the attorney fees. That doesn't seem like that's in line with what the campaign finance book states that they can do as a ballot committee.
Madam Chair, I just have another question for Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen, are the principles of this referendum committee, are they consistent, the same people for both the referendum as well as the Waterville Against Amphitheater?
Yes, they're matched person to person almost.
That's all.
It's a mess. I freely admit it's very confusing and it is a mess. This is, you know, if you're involved in politics long enough and you get people that have no experience and they jump in the middle of stuff like this is what happens. And I've started telling them back in December, you know, you can't just start raising money and throwing it around in an election year like this and having an impact on elections and all the rest of this without you're raising some eyebrows. And this was the first thing when I said, hey, wait a minute, you know, you're raising money as a political action committee but you're giving it to somebody. And I'm not a lawyer. I defer at some point to Mr. Richter because I'm not an attorney. Excuse me. But I think you could see where this confusion comes in. You know, they formed the committee, but then they start raising money through the committee and then they start giving it. Now they're trying to say, well, it was all for this anyway, even though it's through this same committee, even though it's through that ballot committee.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, it seems like there may be something more to this, but there would just need to be additional documentation for us to consider those things and align with what we're able to act on. That's my brief observation with that.
I just have I have some serious concerns that if we don't stop this kind of activity, it's going to, if they get away with it, then others are going to do the same thing. They'll just kind of fly under the radar and not be caught because they're not filing anything to say whether it's a GoFundMe that's really a political action committee. We'll just stay under the radar and we can continue to either oppose issues, oppose candidates, do referendums on issues and raise our money, spend our money however we want with no disclosure, which is counter to what election laws are all about. And this one scares me that we're going to have a lot of other entities going down this road.
Madam Chair, to Commissioner's point, is there any documentation of those referendums? Is there any paperwork?
That's something I could get. I didn't know that we needed, but I can absolutely supply that. I mean, after we filed the complaint, they filed a new referendum. You know, again, because of their inexperience, a lot of the referendums are against administrative issues. Frank LaRose had to rule on the last one because it was deadlocked at our local board of elections. So, you know, these people are having major impact, not just in our region, but it's reaching down here to Columbus at this point as well, because of the things that they're doing. And, you know, to your point, ma'am, when I actually have a breakdown here somewhere of the money from the GoFundMe, where I broke it out. I actually had to download everything and put it into a spreadsheet. But of the 16,000 they raised, and I broke it out by person, there's basically 40 people that are noted, but almost a third of it, or 34% of it, is anonymous in nature. And this speaks directly to anonymous donations being thrown in there as well. This is a fight that ranges just outside of our little city of 6,000 people. Their representative attorney is also the mayor of the next city over, Maumee, Ohio. Wade Kapsakevich, mayor of Toledo, has chimed in on this, trying to get involved as well. So it's having major impact in not just in our small little city, it's having an impact outside of there as well. They get a lot of media attention. There's a lot of people that are paying attention to what's happening with this issue in our small little city.
Thank you. So further questions?
I have one, Madam Chair, for Mr. Richter. So Bill, on the preliminary reviews, so Plowman et al., they were obviously advised of this preliminary hearing.
And they all responded in some manner or form.
But they didn't show up, right?
No. Correct.
Were they advised that they could?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah, that's a part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult when one side doesn't show up.
Right.
Yeah.
To Christina's point.
And I will add, I'm certainly respectful of the comments you've made, Ms. Tavares. But again, my recommendation is based on what we have before us. And it is certainly possible that everything that Mr. Allen is asserting could be true. And they should have established themselves as a PAC. Alternatively, it's very possible that, you know, if all they're doing is supporting the legal challenge and acting in that manner, and they're not making any other contributions, they're not putting out any other materials that say vote for or vote against, then there is no obligation to essentially establish a PAC under that set of circumstances. And so that's what I'm assessing as I look at all the materials that have been provided here from the complaint and the responses, that to me at least, don't demonstrate any ballot issue, electoral related activity at this point. So I mean, over the years, I've certainly seen a lot of groups, again, similar to what Mr. Allen is saying, that more or less screw up, should have established a PAC. Anytime I get the opportunity to talk to somebody, always try to make them aware of what they're potentially doing, and how that could impact them and down the road if they don't do something right away. But here, all the evidence presented to us, both between complaints and responses, shows them raising money, paying it to attorneys. The checks that you guys all looked at were checks that Mr. Plowman represented as being checks that he received only, and that there isn't anything else that was provided to him from any other group. So I mean, that's what my recommend. I don't want you to think I'm making this recommendation without thinking through all of the potential ramifications about what you're speaking.
But on that point, Mr. Richter, you can spend all of your money on legal fees if you're attacking a referendum and you're using the law to go against, let's just say, the amphitheater. You could pay attorneys to fight that one. And that would be still political because it's going against something that the city of X, Y, and Z, Waterville, is proposing, that the city council and or mayor are proposing, which is political. It's going against the actions of an elected official, of duly elected in that community. And it could be a legal battle. It's not always, the money has to go to all campaign activities as far as literature on the street or commercials, radio and television, social media. But they do have some social media going on.
They have a major social media presence in our community and beyond that. And I think, to your point again, I think again, there is some confusion. Again, I really admit, I'm not an attorney. I'm not that versed in it. Phil, Mr. Richter probably is much better off than I am. Again, I would assume he is. But as we just said, yes, the money's being raised by their organization. And yes, Tim Plowman isn't receiving it directly. They're paying for Tim Plowman's lawsuit. It's not their lawsuit. And I think that's the crux of this. They didn't file this lawsuit. Their organization didn't file this lawsuit. An individual member of the community filed the lawsuit. Now they've raised the money and they're paying for it for him. That's where we're saying they're converting it for personal use for an individual, for Mr. Plowman and Mr. Harrell. The lawsuit doesn't mention "not in my backyard." It doesn't mention Waterville citizens against the amphitheater. It may be in line with what they're trying to do. But as a ballot committee, they can't raise funds and then give it to an individual, even if it agrees with their agenda. Even if that person's a member of if they wanted their lawsuit to be for them and to be correct, it should have said Waterville citizens against the amphitheater versus the city of Waterville.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, acknowledging, not an attorney, if I read the statute correctly, it says political committee means combination of someone or issue, right? So if this is considered a political issue, then I read the remainder of it. At no point does it require funds to be spent, or, it doesn't require that to be a PAC. It just says it's formed for a primary purpose to support or oppose a number of things, including an issue. Doesn't require, unless I'm missing it, any receipt of funds, any expenditure of funds. If this is, unless I'm misreading it or I'm being too literal, again, I'm not an attorney. If this is a political issue, then my reading of ORC 3517.01 is it's a PAC by definition. If I'm misinterpreting the language, please let me know.
As usual, statutory language is not always that wonderful, and I think that's the case here, because generally, the approach has always been, to be a political action committee, the primary or major purpose of which, and then, the other portion that goes on from there is to influence the result of an election.
But that's an
through
or.
express
But that's
advocacy.
an
I
or.
appreciate that that's an or. But, if you want to oppose a candidate, that person is running for an office, okay? I could certainly go out and make, let's say you were a trustee in your township. I can oppose you as a trustee in a township when you're not a candidate, and I'm not a PAC at that point, okay? You have to be a candidate or a political party or an issue. And there, I think the intent of that statement is an issue that is on the ballot. It is an electoral issue. It's not just the fact that there is an issue out there. If I want to, trying to think of, the General Assembly has been very active lately with a lot of LGBT stuff. Okay, for one of them, for just to use something current. If I want to oppose that, I have an ability to do that because it is a political issue, but that doesn't make me a political, even if I get 5 other people that, I want to go lobby the General Assembly, or I want to go do whatever, or, be in support of the folks in the General Assembly. That's a political issue that I have an ability to speak on, but it's not an electoral issue. Just like if I want to oppose somebody or support somebody who's bringing that up as an office holder, they're not a candidate at that point. I have an ability to speak out against that person as an office holder when he's not a candidate. The difference here is the language, I think, is, and plus all of these statutes are, put it in the context of electoral issues. That's why it's the election section. And so I would argue that,
You'd argue it's not a political issue.
I would argue that what this is intending to say is, a candidate, somebody who's on a ballot, not just an office holder, but somebody who's on a ballot, and the issue is intended to be an electoral issue, something that is on a ballot. And they left out the word ballot issue, or they left out the word ballot to go along with issue. That would be my argument, because all of these statutes that we're responsible for, are not just against an office holder, unless that person is a candidate. It's not just against a political, well, I mean, you hear political party, obviously, just, naturally goes to an electoral issue. But I think the term issue there in that context is because it is something that is on a ballot, and that's why it's in the election statutes that we're responsible for enforcing.
Okay.
If I may. I have this open in front of me. It says local ballot committees. For a local ballot issue, a ballot issue committee may be created to support or oppose the issue at any time before or after certification of the issue on the ballot. The ballot issue committee must file a designation of treasurer before receiving any contributions or making any expenditures. A ballot issue committee, sometimes called a ballot issue PAC, is a political action committee that is organized to support or oppose the proposed or certified ballot issue or question. Ballot issues include constitutional amendments, proposed laws, liquor options initiatives, referendums, and charter amendments. And that's where our argument again lies. With all due respect to Mr. Richter, they have clearly run 2 referendums through this organization. It's very clear that they've done that.
Are they currently on the ballot?
They're not on the ballot yet, but this specifically states before or after certification of the issue on the ballot, they are recognized as a ballot issue committee.
Which gets into the whole, you may be correct, and they may have already screwed up if this proceeds forward and there is an electoral issue. Okay, but if there's not an electoral issue, then they don't become a PAC. And I've had any number of conversation over the years with people who, in a similar vein, are contemplating taking action or wanting to participate somehow. And my advice to them is always, be careful how you go about establishing yourself or what you want to do. Because over the years, we've seen a number of organizations that start raising money in July, and start collecting money. Then the issue actually eventually makes it onto the ballot. Then they file the designation of treasurer and they try to claim the money that they received prior to filing the designation of treasurer. That's a violation. Don't disagree with you there. What I'm not seeing here is anything that represents that there is something on a ballot or that they are taking any kind of activity for anything on a ballot.
Well, they're trying to put things on the ballot. That's the referendum, the two
But it's
referendums.
not there yet. And so therefore, there is no ballot issue for which they can't act. There isn't anything there yet.
So
It has to be certified to be a ballot issue. Now, if they went out and, you include in here a lot of conversation about the various candidates are out there. If they put out a sign that says vote for our slate and they haven't done anything and they list all those people or just say vote for our slate, then they've taken political action. They've taken something for somebody who's a candidate. At that point, then they've essentially established themselves as a political action committee. But that in the materials that we've received, there's none of that out there. There's none of that outward, what's the statutory statement, influence the result of an election through express advocacy. That's what I don't see any of that here that moves them to the level of being a political action committee at this point.
Madam Chair. I need to make a diaper change after that. Just to lighten the mood, but, in all seriousness, I think that the commission has probably three options at least here, one of which could be accepting the recommendation of the executive director based off of the facts that have been presented here today. Maybe alternatively, we could do a continuance where additional facts could be submitted to us that may, speak to some of this conversation that's been had that may not be documented and supported. And then, third, we could, rule on this as it is written, as it's been submitted and as it's been recommended, with the option of it being revisited with the documentation in a different case that's more specific to that documentation. So just some things I think we ought to consider in the current state of the conversation.
But with all due respect, the third option, I don't know that once we rule on it, it can't be revisited, right? Or
Shouldn't be.
shouldn't be. So it would have to be something that would be a new case that would be submitted based on maybe the things that Mr. Richter was talking about becoming more, maybe it gets put on the ballot and they don't ever change the way they operate.
right,
So,
because that's what I was gonna say. We have stuff like this here. This is their yard signs and their stickers that they have all over the city. Or they've created yard signs they distribute into the city, just like a political candidate, just like any other organization.
Mr. Richter, can we?
I don't
I remember seeing that.
think that way.
Madam Chair.
Some of this was pulled just recently. when we
Oh,
started
okay.
this.
so I know we have someone waiting. We have you still in the middle.
Yes,
So I would like to, take a 10-minute break.
that's fine. That's perfect.
So.
No, you're fine. I'm not in any hurry.
46. So if we could take, a brief break, be back, is 10 minutes enough or do you need?
Oh, yeah, I could do this in
I
30.
think you'd probably do it.
I also need a break.
I need a break too.
So we all need a break. So let's convene back at noon. So we'll take a little bit longer than 10 minutes, if that's all right.
That's-
So. It's 1:58, so we'll, come back into session. So. Were you,
To Mr., yeah, just to Mr. Richter's comment. You know, like I said, the campaign finance handbook that we're pulling this from is very clear. When it says local ballot issue committees, it says anytime before or after certification of the issue to the ballot. It doesn't say it has to be a current ballot issue. It specifically states in the handbook, before or after certification of the issue to the ballot. That is when they become a ballot issue committee or a ballot panel.
thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Allen, if it's permissible, I was going to ask Mr. Richter if it was, he had a piece of paper with some signs, a photo of some signs. Is it, can we see that?
Yes,
Okay.
if he wants to present. that.
Absolutely. I have a bunch of different things, but there you have it. It's their one of two different Waterville and, you know, stop the amphitheater signs that they have, the yard signs that they've sold through people in the community to raise funds. They have stickers, that of a different nature that say, Waterville Citizens Against the Amphitheater stickers that they give out in various locations and various businesses throughout the community. It's a campaign sign.
Well-
That's exactly what it is.
You know, look, $10 to $15 donation for one sign. As someone that has sold a lot of yard signs, those are some, must be really nice yard signs.
Yes.
You know, if you're paying over four, you're paying
Yeah.
too much. Now, that does not say, vote against or, you know, whatever. Madam Chair, yeah. Madam Chair, I agree with Mr. Richter, on a lot of points that he made. As far as we don't necessarily see direct advocacy, there are no vote no's or vote yeses or whatever, but I think as we've worked through this, I now have more questions than answers. And so I respectfully have no issue with setting the matter for a hearing so that we can have both sides here. I don't know what, you know, what my colleagues think.
Full motion.
It can be, Commissioner. I wanted to put that out there that, again, Mr. Richter made a point that I don't necessarily think that Mr. Allen's, some of the things that he's brought forward to us today, I do not believe are political advocacy in nature, but I now think that there may be reason to believe that there's some stuff going on that we maybe don't have to. So I would make a motion, Madam Chair, if it's your pleasure to set the matter for a full hearing.
Second.
We have a motion before us. It's been duly seconded. I'd like for Mr. Lau to see that.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I wouldn't have made that.
No, you're
motion.
fine.
Before, I guess
You keep it.
for the vote, I just would like to add, you know, I agree for a little bit of a different reason. I mean, my understanding of the bar for preliminary review is probable cause. And I mean, to me, I think the crux of this is going to be where the GoFundMe money is being distributed. And we can't know that without a hearing, but I think a probable cause bar has, in my view, been met. So just wanted to add that in prior to the formal vote.
And one additional comment, Mr. Allen, if this commission does vote in the affirmative to set the matter for a full hearing, obviously as a citizen, you're free to say whatever, but I would, you know, recommend that, you know, stick to the facts that, you know, the commission has set a full hearing, that no one has judged anyone,
Yes.
you know, in one way or the other. So.
We have a motion before us. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank
Thank you,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So the next case is Heine et al. 2023 R-181, and Mr. Mead is here.
Mr. Mead is here. Madam Chair, members of the commission, this was a referral from the Marion County Board of Elections concerning a late filing of the 2022 annual report. The report was due on January 31. It was filed on February 17th. The board reflected all that information. My current recommendation is to find a violation and impose a fine of $100. The primary basis for that recommendation is the report was late and there was no argument made or a statement made to the commission to give me an understanding of the circumstances that led to the late filing. So certainly if the commission would like to hear from Mr. Mead, I could swear him in. And we can hear from Mr. Mead, and that may change my recommendation.
You don't do.
Mr. Mead, do you swear or affirm that what you were about to tell the commission is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Yeah, so in 2022, I was first chapter, I was a city council member, first ward, Marion, Ohio, Marion City. My wife and I bought a house in the village of Prospect, which is about 15 miles south. At that point, I gave notice to the Board of Elections saying I would vacate my seat because I no longer lived within the ward. I did so about a month after moving. I then put the Board of Elections on notice again by changing my voter registration address. Sometime while I was active as an elected official, board, maybe at your direction, decided to give notice to two candidates saying it's time to file, it's time to file. At no point was a notice that it was time to file given to me due to them sending the notice to the wrong address that every other candidate was afforded. Then at a later date, I was called. I heard a conversation saying, hey, we sent you the notice to the wrong address. Can you come in and file this for us? And I said, sure. And I came down the next day and filed it correctly. I think that to some degree, I should have just filed. I should have just known better as a prior candidate. To another degree, there was no notice that was given in regards to filing. I was no longer a candidate, so I was under the impression that I had to the end of the year to decide what to do with my campaign finance account, which is likely incorrect, but that's how we got to where we are today.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners?
Yeah, I do, just for clarification, Mr. Mead. So I'm looking at the report that we have. So you were basically 17 days late, is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you then, how were you notified? Were you then notified in the mail that it got forwarded?
No, the director called me and said, hey, we forgot that you moved. We've been sending the mail to the wrong address.
The director of Marion County?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then I said, well, can I come in tomorrow and fix it? They said, sure. And from then on, I thought everything's fine. And then I got a letter for this in the mail.
I'm sure. May I ask the executive, it's the first time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Madam Chair, if I may, two questions. A, when you moved within Marion County, you did not move.
Yeah.
Okay. When you filed, you said that you were not a first-time candidate? You had ran?
No, I just finished, well, I was about 6 months into my second term.
Okay. You, oftentimes when you file, there's a packet with your petition, et cetera, that has the important dates to remember. Do you remember if you were given that?
I likely was given that. Really, the crux of the issue was I incorrectly was under the impression that due to the fact that I was no longer an elected official, I was essentially didn't have to file at the same times. Like I knew that I was going to have to file at some point, but I was not under the impression that I was on the same deadline as an active candidate would be in an election year. due to the fact that since we run every 2 years, since it was 2023, I think I was fine, I think the filing would be similar to that of an active candidate, of which I have a campaign account open still, but it'll be closed by the end of the year due to military obligation.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair, let me ask a question.
Yes.
Do you currently have a balance in your account or is it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say we could try to close it out for you today.
Let us help.
As people had.
Yeah. Mr. Richter, oftentimes we have had, in my few meetings, you know, the standard first violation of $50.
Yeah.
You arrived at the $100 because
There was no
no response. Okay. Has the respondent told us why he didn't respond? Was it going to the old address or? Okay.
Yes, he does not receive. a
Would you be
reply.
comfortable with the $50?
I was gonna change my recommendation to say I'd recommend the finding of a violation, but for good cause, as opposed to find and refer the matter for the prosecution.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor that's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. Thank you very much. And thanks for your patience. Appreciate it.
He was out feeding his meter.
But if I get this waived and if I have a parking ticket, then I really.
Yeah, it's a moot.
Violation.
Yes.
That's the real win
You're right.
for the future.
Okay. So
You're right.
at this point, we're in the good cause,
We're in the group.
in the group recommendations. First one being good cause. They are cases 2023 R-178 and 2023 R-182. Mr. Richter.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, these were filing, referrals made, one by Marion County and a bunch of the other ones from. Just to get these papers, I apologize. They're both from Marion County. The reports were due on January 31. Actually, it reflects both of them filed on February 17th, similar to Mr. Mead. And one was on April, or one was on February 6th. I'm sorry. And the explanations were given based on the explanations and the fact that right around 2 weeks late for the filing of the campaign finance report. My recommendation is to find a violation. But for good cause, not a further fine, or for the matter for further prosecution. I'd be glad to answer any other questions. Commission has any.
Any questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I will move to accept the recommendation of the state director.
We have a recommendation that's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next category is $50 fine category. They are cases 2023 R-179, 2023 R-186, 2023 R-189. All of these will be 2023 R.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna read the last
It felt.
three. So 191, 193, 194, 195, 197, 199, 200, and 203.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I'm just leafing back through here. All of these cases are respondents that are before the commission for the first time. The reports were filed. I think they were all originally referred for failing to file because we received the greatest majority of them from Hamilton County down in the Cincinnati area. If I can find one of my Hamilton County referrals. And we received them at the end of March. The reports were all filed in April or May. Well, if you were all look closely at the synopsis or the explanation that I have provided to all of you, which is the synopsis of what was submitted, you will see a great similarity to almost all of those. What you didn't see was the actual response that was submitted, because I always synopsize those. The greatest majority of them were all exactly the same, with the only change being the name of the candidate and the notary, and the case number, if there was a case number included on there. As I start going through them, I come across these like, okay, and almost all of them where they filed the waiver anticipating that they didn't have anything else to file, then subsequently found out that, yeah, they had to they get the campaign committee over, and they had to file something else. So obviously I'll give Hamilton County Board of Elections probably great credit for helping all of particularly those. There were a few from other counties. I know there was one from Richland I noticed. But the greatest majority of them were from Hamilton County, and they all had pretty much exact same response. But that's my recommendation. Find a violation, impose a fine of $50, because they were all about 2 to 3 to 4 months late.
So moved.
Second.
Right, we have a motion that's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Excuse me. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next category is $100 fine category. We have case number 2023 R-202.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, this is the second time that this person has been before the commission. In 2020, the commission found a violation, but for good cause, did not impose a fine or refer the matter. The report was filed about, looks like 4.5 months late. 3.5. About 3.5 months late. A reasonable response was given, but because this is the second time, my recommendation is to find a violation and impose a fine of $100.
Questions or comments?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next case is case number 2023 R-201. This recommendation or this category is consolidate case, find a violation, and impose a fine of $150.
This is a matter where there was an outstanding prior that had never been resolved. Then this case was filed. The Board of Elections informed me that the reports have been filed. Would have been in the updates. Somehow I didn't star that one properly. I apologize. But the reports have been filed. The committee is still open. We did not receive any kind of response. And so my recommendation is to consolidate this case 2023 R-201 and 2022 R-418. Find a violation and impose a fine of $150.
Any questions?
So
Second. We have a motion on the floor. It's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote 7-0. The next case is a $25 a day with reconsideration option. That is case number 2023 R-177.
Yeah, this one will come as a little bit of a surprise probably to the treasurer for this candidate, but after getting the original the original referral and being prepared to make this recommendation, I got in contact with the board. They confirmed that nothing had subsequently been filed. Just yesterday, I got a response from the treasurer that went into a rather lengthy explanation, and he has some physical problems that led to reports not being filed. Not being sure, I reached back out to the chair of the Clark County Board of Elections, which is where this is coming from, and had a conversation with the director of the board, who indicated that while he did submit to them what he submitted to me, and it included certain reports, it did not include everything they asked for. There were certain receipts that were still outstanding. And so even regardless of the fact that he filed a report, which you would have gotten a synopsis of in the updates from yesterday, my recommendation is to find a violation and impose a fine of $25 per day. To give them the opportunity to have the reconsideration should the report actually be filed with the Board of Elections that includes the receipts that they still say are outstanding. If there's any other aspect of this case, he can request reconsideration. We'll tip it back up and may make a totally different recommendation, but as of this point, as of my conversation with the director of the board yesterday afternoon, the reports have still yet to be filed. So that's my recommendation.
Madam Chair, I'll move the executive director's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion that's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next case is 2023 R-187, $25 a day with reconsideration option with payment of $300.
As it relates to this case, the Board of Elections confirmed that no report has been yet filed by the candidate. This is a referral for the failure to file 2022 annual report, which would have been due on the last business day of January 23. There was a prior case that the commission decided last October, which we did find a violation, imposed a fine of $150. That fine has not yet been paid. And so that's why I added the additional element of recommending reconsideration with the payment of $300 that would reflect, that would include that $150 outstanding amount.
So move.
Second. Okay, we have a motion that's been duly seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries with a vote of 7-0. The next group is continue upon request of the respondent. Those cases to be continued are 2023 R-173 and 2023 R-174. Those were continued. The next group is a group to be continued for service. The cases to be continued are 2023 R, all of them, and then the numbers at the end. 173, 172, 175, 180, 183, 184, 185, 188, 190, 192, 196, and 198. Those cases are continued for service. And then that brings us to other business. And the first. Sorry. The first item would be discussion concerning the criteria to assess commission operations in the position of the executive director. Discussion will concern strategic thinking. So I think we've had a break. So is everyone ready to dive into that? Okay. So I think Mr. Lyle and Mr. Knight have been very instrumental, as well as Mr. Richter. So yeah, bring it over to you gentlemen.
I'll defer to Mr. Knight. So I can at least look at my stuff.
I'll defer to Mr. Knight as well.
Fine, it's you.
We have to swap you because the laptop ran out of juice.
Well, I will go ahead and at least start.
My stuff.
I think again, going back to the conversation that Mr. Knight and I had, if we started this conversation, we talked about looking into updating job descriptions. Obviously, some of the conversations we've had have been whether position would stay as one or divided. That can certainly come into play. As I continued to think about it, and partially because of the general budget, although I do have a request out to talk to our budget analyst, and he did get back to me, I think after the last meeting, and just kind of said, yeah, I have no problem discussing that with you once this budget season ends, and so once all that gets done, probably about mid-July, maybe early August, I will reach back out to him and, maybe just get together for a cup of coffee and have a conversation with him about that. But that's obviously the biggest potential issue for doing that, trying to separate those, is just how do you come up with the funding to do that? And also, is there, does the amount of work justify two different people doing that job? Which, as I've continued to think about, I'm not sure that it does. But we can all have an opinion as it relates to that. So that would be on my job description. We just redid Chris's 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 3. 5? Is it?
I think it was, I think it was either late 2017 or early 2018.
I think it was early 2018. Because you're right, it was before the pandemic. I did
Yeah.
that which. And so, and that had been, you were about what, 6 or 7 years into the old one at that point? When we,
At that point, almost 10.
with 10, yeah, I was gonna say. So I think, and depending on what we do with a part-time person, should we bring them back, it would, that would all impact that. We have to take a look at that as time allows. We'll see where that goes.
Mr. Richter, on that point, so if it was early 2018, this was before the part-time administrative person left.
Correct.
So it would have to be revised again, correct? The position for Chris,
Now say that one more time. I apologize.
because the former part-time administrative person left after your job description was updated in 2018. You're doing a lot of those duties that she did once she left.
My understanding is, so the position that she vacated and my current position now, I guess to back it up, the position that I was originally brought in to fill was a much smaller role. And in order to, once Phil asked me to get together, all of your duties, and we're going to review this to see if you still fit this description. In order, being as I did not, they created a new position for me, which better suited what I was handling. Those job duties and what Betty was doing in her job duties, those positions are really similar. So as far as what additionally I was taking on, more of a workload, but it was still things that both Betty and I, they were in our descriptions. The difference between those two positions are very minimal. There were some differences, I believe, that wasn't drafted.
Thank you.
Yeah, it did, because I'll be honest with you, I think as much as anything to get him a pay increase, we reflected essentially the duties he was doing. And increase the duties there. So I think it's a fair representation, but as time goes on, I think it will necessitate, I don't know if I want to say necessitate, but it should be an obligation to review that again and potentially come up with something different. So.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Phil, was he then compensated for doing both jobs? Was there additional pay or no?
No, I mean, essentially no, but yes, because he's got step increases as time has gone on.
He's a bargaining unit employee.
No,
No.
No.
So is classified or unclassified?
unclassified.
But which is that the one that's legally protected by statute? Is the
Classified is.
classified?
Yes, he is.
I was a bit confused. Is intuitively linked to the other one?
Right, and that is, I didn't strong arm him, I swear, but that is something that he chose as we discussed it, as we discussed moving forward. It allowed, not that I'm trying to get rid of him, trust me, I'm not, but it allowed, going unclassified allows us a little more flexibility as it relates to handling the position and where it goes from there.
Work from home, et cetera.
Yes.
probably.
Mhm.
Blended schedule.
Yep.
Parenting, understanding.
Hours of operations.
Right.
May I recommend, so we've had a lot of conversation about whether it should be 2 roles or 1 for the executive director and legal counsel. Maybe instead we ought to look at it through the lens of a percentage budgeted for these roles to be covered. That way, if you had somebody who's equipped to do both, you could appropriately compensate them. But maybe if you were hiring an executive director, say
Chris was someday fit for that job, but wasn't an attorney,
Yeah,
then you could, in balance, compensate the attorney to be part-time or full-time or whatever the needs of the commission would face for that portion of the job role expectation. Maybe that way we're not so prescriptive, but have the recognition that it may need to fluctuate based off of the talent that's in front of the commission to be hired.
that's a good point. And that is a part of the job description process, is
Okay.
breaking the percentages. Don't ask me what they are,
Interesting.
as I sit here. But I know that, as you go through, okay, you're gonna do this, and you're gonna do this, and there is a percentage in there
Good.
that is identified. And that's the case for all the positions that we have.
I guess Madam Chair, I would like to just make one other comment. There's a big difference when you are the staff executive director, staff attorney that grew with the creation of the organization. So you took on more and more and more versus a brand new person coming in. You fluctuate, you grow with the job, you take on more based on your skills and abilities. A person who's never worked with this organization would not be able to do that. We've talked about how much is in the executive director's head, how much is not written anywhere. And that's a little scary. That's a little scary, yeah. Because no one else is gonna have that level of expertise and history of what this commission has gone through. And so I think we need to keep that in mind as we develop the position responsibilities, whether it's one position, two positions, and I agree with the commissioner that we don't want to be too prescriptive, but we do need to recognize that the person that is a part of the creation and grows the organization is going to be totally different than somebody coming in new off the street.
May I just say, we can all speak freely. I don't.
Oh,
Yes, yeah. I feel like that's the best.
But we don't know about it.
And fortunately, we do have some continuity with this. I mean, being a
Permission to.
long-term employee, I didn't realize you've been with the commission that long. You're
Started September 3rd of 2008 as a temporary, and then was hired permanent on February. It's a year or two.
Yeah, so no, that is a nice addition. I consider, we do have, God forbid something happened to Mr. Richter. We at least have, we have.
Learning how to use.
continuity, when it's done that institutional, but
Chris has, has expressed that, he would like to continue to grow
Mhm.
with this organization and continue to move in a, upward fashion. So I think that that's something obviously that cannot dictate what we decide, but it's something that we can keep as, as part of how this can continue to have the continuity and the institutional knowledge that will be needed. But we've already cast a net of protection over Phil so that nothing's gonna happen, no ungodly anything, so.
Now that you mention it, they do have very similar glasses and it would just be a comfortable.
you're gonna have to work on the hair color though,
They say the president.
wish that one.
Give me just a few more years with my kids at home.
Oh, my goodness.
All right, enough for asking. Let's stop.
So, so where does the discussion go from there?
So, we talked about strategic thinking. I may be working off of an older version because Bill made some edits and I think this version I have is a little bit different. But, under strategic thinking, we list the headline demonstrates understanding of mission, vision, and strategies for the Alex Commission, maintains the overall big picture of the business and its interrelationships. And then list a few goals that we can lay out. One is update all job descriptions, develop executive director succession plan, develop initial set of operational metrics for the commission, implement and evaluate a subset of these met those metrics, and then draft a 2024 strategic plan, which a lot of the discussion that we've had at this point kind of falls under 2024 strategic plan, right? And I guess, I mean, I would advocate that, you know, and not that all of these need to happen, right? That's what this is meant to sort of call out, like what subset of this is most important. So the 24 strategic plan could encompass a few of those things. I mean, to me, as opposed to us, you know, kind of just shouting opinions and thoughts. I mean, I guess I'm a more traditional private sector approach, and ask management to go and develop a strategic plan and then come and present to us why they think, and then we have that as a framework to discuss. And, you know, that strategic planning, right, should include, I mean, most of the whiteboard, right, it's Chris's role, scoped right. Could it be adjusted? Do we need them to split the two people? You know, what's, you know, how do we start a succession plan? What, you know, maybe metrics are part of it, maybe it's not. But, I mean, a lot of this kind of falls under that. And I don't know that we need to have a strategic plan every year. You have to have a budget, but that gets kind of defined. But I mean, at least every 2 to 3 years, we ought to be talking about a strategic plan. And certainly as ongoing, once we have one, we should be looking, how are we progressing against said plan, right? But I mean, I would advocate for, you know, Phil and Chris, and certainly we can all be resources in that, but come up with a framework of what they think the plan should include. And then use that as our framework to hopefully get to a set of decisions. And that's again, that's one part of the strategic thinking. That's a little bit separate, right? And certainly the way I think about this in terms of the executive director evaluation, if that is one of the things that we put, that's something that we evaluate how we did in sort of strategic planning, right? Anyway, I'll shut up now.
Are we marrying succession planning and strategic planning, or is the succession planning a subset of the strategic planning in this conversation?
I would advocate for the latter.
One does what?
So it's really.
I guess for me, I'm a little uncomfortable with strategic planning just because it's generally over multiple years. Little concerned because each of the commissioners only sits on this commission for a year. Is it a strategic plan or is it a year plan? Because the next commission may come in and decide they want something else.
That's just a change of strategy,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that happens in business all the time. That's
But-
why,
But that's why I had a nonprofit, so we do 3-year strategic plans.
Yeah.
And it is with timeframes and metrics
Yep.
for each one of the years.
Yeah.
You measure yourself each year on what you've accomplished. If you only have 1 year with this set of commissioners, it's a little difficult to say, this is a strategic plan that's going to lead us to what, rather than goals and objectives for 2024. Put together by the executive director and team. And then we say, yes, we agree with that, just like, you know, even with a budget, you know, this is what I'd like to have versus this is what the General Assembly is going to give me. But this is based on what I think this commission needs in order to be successful. Here are the strategic objectives that I want to accomplish in 2024. And this is what I need to be able to accomplish that. And we as a commission vote for that 2024 year goals and objectives. It just seems a little disingenuous to have a strategic plan for 1 year.
I would respectfully disagree. I mean, if you don't have some level of thought to the future, how do you inform resource allocation to get there? I mean, if you're just kind of going year to year, I mean, I typically work in 3 to 5 year plans, right? But I mean, do board members change? Absolutely. Things change, right? And management comes with like, let's adjust what we're doing. And certainly the annual budgets fit into that, and things change all the time. I just think if you don't think into the future, you're going to, kind of forever be hindered, right, by that annual thought. And future, it's kind of the best practices organization aspect, I guess, in my perspective. And future commissioners can look at it and vote to change it or vote to throw it out or whatever they want to do. That's certainly their option. But I just think, I mean, as an example, succession planning, that's going to be more than a year, right? You're going to have to think about, the split, the person, how our budget's going to look, what happens if, Chris decided to take another job. I mean, this isn't something I think like Phil's not leaving next year, we don't think. So, I mean, it's a longer horizon than 1 year. And
But it could
it's
be-
one example.
But it could be a temporary leave. That's the piece that we're not keeping in mind. He could be ill. And it'd be a temporary leave of absence that we didn't plan for. We don't have
Sure.
a succession plan. Who steps in if Bill were to leave? We still need an attorney, so we would have to have somebody step in for a period of time. So succession plan, that's an absolute necessity when you have such a small organization as we have.
Agreed.
I still disagree with the whole strategic, because here's what we're forgetting. This is government. It is not a private sector business. It's not a private nonprofit. Whoever comes in the next administration can set some agendas, as well as the General Assembly. Many of you are aware that this General Assembly has some members that want all the commissioners to be attorneys. And so there are some things we have no control over. And it's a lot harder to develop a strategic plan when your budget is defined by the governor and the legislature, when the policies and how you are organized and how you define who you are as a commission is defined by either the governor and or the General Assembly. So it's a little different. It's not.
I hear you, but again, I think those are all the things that you said are inputs. And I spent some time in government, I guess, trying to implement private sector practices. So I guess I'm more than a little biased, but I think it's the sort of, we can't do these things because we're government kind of thinking that
No,
holds the government back from accomplishing things. I think that's like, yeah, sure, it's a reality, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't work or help. So we'll just have to agree, disagree. It's fair.
Hey, as the kid sister here in the commission, I'm used to breaking up fights. No, but why not, as kind of a compromise, look at a strategic plan on an annual basis, but more of an ambiguous 5-year vision or forecast? That way we have ideas or goals for the future, but we recognize we're not wholly in control of them. And that doesn't mean that they can't fluctuate or change based off of a new commissioner rotating in. And it should always be a fresh set of eyes. But I think we may be getting into debates that are not wholly necessary, because realistically, we're going to be so far ahead of where we were 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 years ago with actually even having these things in place, that we might be giving the future commissioner more credit than they deserve, whoever they might be, because by the time they get here, they may see something that's actually functioning rather than something that was non-existent. So it may not even be that it fluctuates so immensely on an annual basis either. It may be, hey, that's a good footprint. Let's tweak it one way or the other. And we may just be beating each other up.
I'm not suggesting 5, I'm suggesting closer to 2, maybe grow into 3. you know, and again, like two with one much more defined than two, like you start to get into like what are goals more than like definitive line item specifics, but anyway, that's.
Yeah, I'm not wholly opposed to operating on a 2-year basis because that's more reflective of the budgeting process in the General Assembly. And so maybe the financial goals would be more in alignment with that, for that purpose. So.
And even though there will be, you know, like right now, we're waiting for another
Commission.
person to be appointed. And at the end of this year, we'll definitely lose Ms. Kaufman. Hopefully, we don't lose you. Then there's a carryover for, you know, for a number of years before we go through the process again, of getting. So there is a certain amount of continuity that, you know, the commission experiences. You know, because all of you are on 5-year terms. And so there's that period of time for at least 2 years when everybody stays together for a while. So.
And we're at that point with me going off and
Right.
having that continuity.
Mhm.
And honestly, and I've been from the nonprofit world for a while now as well. Putting together a strategic plan is just that. It's a plan. It can be changed, it can be tweaked, it can grow with the organization. So it's not like it's set in stone and there's nothing that can be amended or changed. So I think the framework is really where we're at with it at this point. So I think getting the framework in place with, you know, Mr. Richter and Chris's input is going to be probably the most important step at this point. And then we can figure out how long we want it to live and, you know, obviously we've all agreed, I think we've all agreed, maybe not you two, but that Phil needs to be evaluated on a more regular basis because first of all, it's not fair to him or to Chris not to get an evaluation that could, you know, give them cost of living increases, that kind of thing. And then also give them the guidance that they need to perform their job to the fullest. So you wouldn't take off on a road trip without a roadmap. So I think it's unfair to not, even though they perform exceptionally well, I think it's nice for them to also have that roadmap of what expectations are. So I think that's where the ground stage. And I think that that's not as hard as the 3-year or 5-year plan. So I think we're maybe not putting the cart ahead of the horse, but just maybe we're thinking too far in advance at this point where we just need to get the groundwork laid and then go from there.
One of the things that would help me as a newbie is understanding our budget better. I don't know what our operating budget is. I don't know. I just found out a month or two ago, it was very recently, that part of the filing fees of a candidate is actually coming to this commission. I had no idea. I always wondered why there were filing fees, and then I figured it out. So I would like to know and understand our budget a little better. Mr. Richter, maybe that's my fault. I should have reached out and said, hey, let me come over and, but that would help us, you know, we can have big plans, but at the end of the day, if the purse strings are not there, then it could be off or not. Do you know, by the way, if the Senate kept the requested increase in? I haven't looked at the LSC doc.
I don't.
Okay,
I don't.
we need to check that. The House.
Small enough for them to have not even noticed it was.
That's right.
That's right. That's right.
To have it.
Right.
taken.
I would think that it remained the same as
Okay.
it went through the House.
And it was a very
That's-
modest.
right,
well,
that's
it wasn't-
my-
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my gut.
Yeah, if we
But-
got then, we're probably still.
Well, in my presentation, I certainly asked, but asking doesn't get.
Mhm.
And so, my gut is it's the same that went through the,
Okay.
actually, well, no, I'm assuming that to be the case, but I had to put my allotments in by last Friday. And so I did that. So when we get done here, I'll send you, you know, what the allotments are for this year that reflects an annual budget. And, you know, if you know, I know you come in
Yeah,
and out of
yeah.
town, give me a heads up. We can sit down and either in my office or go grab a cup of coffee
Sure.
or something like that. and Just kind of go over it all and I can talk with you about all that stuff.
Because we receive revenues from multiple, you know, there are fine revenue,
Mhm.
GRF dollars, you know, and then the filing fees, which I was like I said, it was quite a surprise.
Yeah.
And so I think that would, you know, shouldn't be the main part of strategic planning, but certainly,
Huge input.
yeah, I mean,
You
because,
really can do what the resources will allow you to do.
yeah. And if the ask, you know, if the direction is to, you know, to break apart, you know, the staff attorney / executive director, particularly for succession planning, then how much will that cost?
And what,
Commission.
what advocacy, I can't speak English, so I do it slowly. What advocacy over what time frame will be required to get that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can't expect to just, oh, maybe you guys can, but I mean, I'm assuming we can't expect to call up a few folks and they're just gonna approve it, right?
Well, it depends. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Their resources are.
Yeah.
like at the time, if They've got a rainy day fund or not.
Yeah.
But I mean, but
Yeah,
that's part of
you're
it,
right.
right? And how long do we need to talk to who, right?
Yeah,
She's
and
like,
some,
Ophelia call all of them.
that's a good idea. That's a really good idea.
That's the right decision. to do
Yeah.
it, Right.
I agree. And obviously, you know, figuring out, you know, our obviously you know, this biennium's near the finish line, but what's the ask going to be? And, you know, we're also dealing with a situation that's, I think, fairly unique in Ohio government, that Mr. Richter is the sole, has been the sole head exec
Mhm.
of this commission since its inception. Yeah, you'll get you a statue at some point. Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
why it's
The one and the only.
The one and the only.
That's what your business
Uh,
ornament.
I mean, so we maybe need to have an unveiling of sorts, but that's unique. And so I think that any request to the General Assembly should, you know, have that caveat that this is a very unique, it's not a problem. It's an opportunity, whatever it may be, that Mr. Richter has been carrying these two responsibilities for, at this point, 25, 30 years, right?
27.
Yeah, 27.
There's also an opportunity to shine a light on some shared administrative services and opportunities for creating efficiencies within this commission and hopefully across all government boards. But I mean, the credit card processing thing, just little things that I feel like should be shared expenses amongst boards.
So
Or, you know, we could have a lot of efficiencies created if the government wants to work smarter and not harder. But if you were able to identify weaknesses that could be shared expenses amongst these boards, then that's a pitch we could make to just about any conservative legislator to say, hey, for this small nominal increase in the budget, you could make all of these entities operate more efficiently and serve the respective constituent better. And I think we could get some people on board with that. I don't know what all of those things are, but I know that we've talked about the credit card processing, et cetera. And, you know, there's no reason our little tiny commission should bear the weight of that if it's something that could be utilized for all.
I mean, I feel like we're so behind in the, you know, technology. And I do think people are very inclined
Right.
to give you their credit card number. But I mean, when the costs are prohibitive, then you just, you know, you have to do what's best in that aspect too. But I really do think that we could move the commission forward in different ways that would result in resolved cases, you know, fines that were paid, that kind of thing. Just
We don't accept credit cards now?
the fees were too
Okay.
prohibitive to do that.
Is there an opportunity to, like, does DAS have a statewide contract?
I don't, that's what we need to explore,
do.
but there are little things, even like being able to utilize text message communications where we could have regimented schedules of notification going out. not automating Chris, but giving him regular and consistency and frequency with communications that I'm sure would be applicable amongst multiple boards and commissions, a need that might exist. And if they would just fund that technology or that programming or software,
Or something.
we'd be cooking.
Something as simple as, you know, there's a CRM and we can just pay
Right.
for one license as opposed to
Exactly.
limitation. And we could, you know, maybe, you know, not less easily miss things like not setting things up for service or whatever. it is. I'm assuming you're doing that all on some sort of Excel spreadsheet or you can in your head.
Yeah, I would just, using Word, access to that stuff.
I mean,
Right.
to be honest, I'm hoping that, you know, you would take the approach of this a little bit kind of blank slate. What
Oh,
are
yeah.
the things I would like to have done, or and certainly don't have the resources to do all of them, but there are probably some, you know, low hanging fruit that we could do. And just lifting out of the weeds to just
Yeah.
give that some thought is a valuable exercise. I believe.
And the bigger department or commissions and boards probably don't worry about these things because they probably just get a bigger budget and they go and buy it and purchase it independently, but there probably is a lot of waste in that as well.
It's ironic you say that. I ran into my old budget analyst prior to the current one, who now is working with JFS.
It's a monstrosity.
And we got to talking about the differences between his $3 or $4 billion
Yeah.
budget that he's working through and all the various challenges and complexities that he has in dealing with that. As opposed to my $600,000 budget. So, it's like.
Well, you know,
differences
smaller
with
budgets
scale.
often mean smaller problems, I'm just saying. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no kidding.
Biggest people in the world have no money at all.
Yeah. I used to joke when I was a county commissioner, you know, the county was 27,000 and I talked to my colleagues with, you know, in Hamilton County and it cost me $10,000 to get elected. It cost them $1 million. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll take my
Yeah.
27,000
Yeah.
county anytime. Right.
So where are we at in the process then? What's our next step?
Well, I mean, we've been, kind of hitting it chunk by chunk. And Bill been, I think, you know, taking notes of general thoughts. We have customer focus.
Yeah.
We could continue on the pace of talking about that at the next meeting. Or, you know, we could just say, that customer focus, we got plenty of that stuff we talked about, and then the next step really should be taking what we've discussed at this point and hopefully, you know, Phil and Chris kind of coming back with, here's what we think we can accomplish.
Okay.
And then hash out as a group what we do and don't agree with, and hopefully, you know, approve something. That seem reasonable.
So they're bringing something to us.
That's
Right.
yeah. Certainly then they obviously feel free, and I would encourage them to talk to all of us individually and get more input, ask questions, right? As a part of that, but to me, and if there's something on customer focus that you really think needs to be put in there, you can certainly add it in. You can certainly add that as part of the discussion, right? Or other things that aren't on here, right? This isn't some like, you know, closed box that there's things we haven't addressed that you think we should be in here. You know, I absolutely add those, but that's my view of where we are.
That makes sense. Kind of like a working document that we could look at.
Yeah, okay. And I would recommend that for August 10th, right?
August 10th.
August 10th, only because.
The next meeting.
The next meeting.
Well, no, our next one's July
Yes.
20th.
It's going to be very long.
July 20th is gonna be.
Continuation of Schmidt.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
So everyone eat your meat.
That's
Or
why.
your lunch.
Wait,
I'm going to ask, I'm going to see. can we
Yeah, the
put
Bahamas are
on
looking
that
good. That's
particular
not
day?
maybe Europe.
Can we put the
I might be.
regular agenda at the beginning and then the 20th?
That's what we normally do.
Okay,
That's
so
what we
I
do.
can sit for
Yes.
that portion and then Mr. Stalbert.
Now, we don't know that,
Yes.
I'll still be here.
well, no, we don't know that Congresswoman Representative Patty Gordon Furter, she'll be wanting to stick around till the very end. If she's present, she may be
ready to rock and roll. And usually we let people in the crowd dictate the order of the agenda, so you might have to pop in and out.
It will be interesting.
I'll be here for both though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so.
Yeah, 'cause you're not gonna be a
I
witness.
didn't.
I'll be here for both. Yeah.
On that particular case. Maybe I'm.
You are
Using
accusing yourself of Schmidt, right? Yes.
So do we
You
need
will.
Stauber to step in for that, or would we have
Yeah.
that without him?
No, Mr. Stauber.
Mr. Stalber.
Oh, okay, so
Back around to that. Yep.
Peter's gonna be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So the next meeting will be
The office.
full and it will be,
That
Oh.
more than anything. Yeah.
Yes.
It will be good.
You might want to practice that, using that gavel and to get ready for it.
Conversation.
yeah, you have to be.
Yep.
Okay, so everyone feels good about where we're at and then our next steps have already been defined. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, good. So, the next item is the friendly reminder concerning the EEO awareness and sexual harassment prevention for 2023. If you have not completed, that's why I said, oh, phooey.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah. Oh, that's what you.
If you did.
I have no idea. All I know is that thanks to Mr. Lyle, I had honestly forgotten about it. But.
Thank you, Mr. Lyle.
But he did, he got back to me, I was like, oh yeah, I didn't do that, so I did it. And,
No doubt.
you know, then. Oh yeah, then I got, you know, kind of a friendly reminder, as it were. Shortly after that, and then, oh, I should have kept open the email. I don't know if I kept open. I think it was early last week. See, that's it.
I'm just curious, as a commissioner,
Mhm.
all the conversation about classified, unclassified, what is our status as far as individual rights and compliance with that measure?
All I know is that I got on June 8th, I got another reminder from, you know,
State government employees
here's,
to take
here's
it.
where we are, and I think it was doing that one. That
Yeah.
literally the guy sent out, an Excel file
Don't want to give up my conscience.
that I don't want to say it threw everybody under the bus because it had both whether you had or hadn't completed it. Okay. But.
What, other than Mr. Lyle, I think we were all in the same boat.
No, we're at 50% right now.
Oh, okay, then. We know who we are.
We're at 50%. And I could.
You
I-
did it?
How long did it take you?
Online coaching.
Yeah.
An hour.
It's an hour and
One of
Hey,
the
Phil.
boring hours you're going.
We needed it.
Yeah, you can't.
Hey, Phil.
fast Forward through it.
Was it the
because
email
they
you sent
make
on
you take it
Thursday
past it like
that had the Excel spreadsheet?
I didn't send the whole Excel spreadsheet to them. What I was about to say was,
It's not, it's like the driver's test. You can take it without listening, but it doesn't let you do that.
Okay, so
yeah, there it is.
she does not.
It's an hour.
Yeah, she was like.
Yeah, it's been there.
I'm gonna go find sort of-
Do we have to log into Oaks for that? Into the
Yes.
miles?
Yeah, it's, which there's a job aid that was in the email that'll tell you.
Okay, yeah,
all right. Okay. That's a late night project for
The
me.
email that I downloaded, okay,
Yeah.
it had both those who completed and those who didn't, okay, so it was fair across the board. But it did list all 44,000 people.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
I'm looking at it right now. And
Wow.
so I went back, you know, I went back in and did it, you know, sorted based on the elections commission. And so I know now where all of us stand. So anyway, they want it done by June 30th.
Okay.
What happens? I don't know the answer to that. What
They
happens?
might kick us off.
Technically, as a
Yeah.
legislator, we were.
they're never gonna refill their
employees of
position.
the state, but
Uh-huh.
We are too.
yeah,
Yeah.
technically.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're at 50% right now. I'll put it that way.
So are you saying you one time push the envelope?
It's time to check my record.
I know.
I'm voting with saying I don't do well in forced situations.
All I know is I keep getting emails from this guy saying, here's your status right at the moment.
So-
Okay,
So
thank
Mr.
you.
Rick's asking us to do it, so he stops getting emails.
Okay,
Well, I'm sure I will continue to get the emails, but at least if we get to a point where everybody has done it by June 30th, I
yeah.
can then respond back and say, the Ohio Elections Commission is in complete compliance with this obligation that you have set.
That would make you feel good, wouldn't it?
Oh, gosh.
We want
yes.
that.
Yes.
We want that. We give Phil enough gray hair, so we don't need to give him.
Anyway, just letting everybody know, it's a friendly reminder from me.
Is any of the curriculum, is it available outside of the format or like just the general guidance? I just see the headline.
I
And-
haven't looked into it any further. It was three different,
It's
videos.
It's pretty
Okay.
standard.
That went through,
Textual
yeah.
guidance, maybe
And
not
each
something
video
like
was
that.
about
Oh.
15, 20 minutes, and then you had the little test in there.
Check it out.
You know, wasn't that challenging.
Obviously.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
With those CEs are pesky.
so that's it. And then the next meeting is July 20.
Okay.
So with that,
It's
all of
gonna-
our business has been
Sorry.
not completed.
No, but for our meeting with the case we have, what's our time frame? So we should hold the day open, I'm
Yes.
assuming, right?
Yes.
Like 10 to 4. I mean, I think
I wish I could give you a different answer and give you some kind of specific time frame, but I would literally plan to keep the entire, we plan to be here through the entire day.
And breaks down to like-
Yes,
Well, the reason I raised that is the issue we had at the last hearing.
right.
So
I would
maybe.
I would anticipate them closed business. I wouldn't anticipate us going beyond closed business.
Well, that's 5 o'clock, which is fine, but
We
you,
have-
you will state that for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I will share with you, then this will probably be Ophelia's last commission meeting because she's starting to get vocal. So thank you for enduring it.
Oh, miss her.
I could.
Miss her. I do too. She's like a great.
I think it's a very nice, I think she's a nice addition to our meeting. I mean it. I mean it.
The legislature, they always said, I hear a coup and it reminded me why I did a job, but then there were people that wanted us dead for being there in our presence because they weren't the same personality. So we have both.
Yeah.
You had different opinions and I.
Definitely lights our bring us joy.
Definitely.
Brings us
Well,
joy.
well said.
Yeah.
Again, she's getting active, so you're gonna wanna,
she's gonna wanna crawl around.
She doesn't want to be here.
No.
but since you have to listen to like the videos about different people's needs.
Thank you for
I'm-
bringing her.
oh,
I will add.
Thanks for permitting it. I usually don't ask permission, so.
Who says,
You were very
who
gracious.
says we can't have a little playpen?
Yeah, I mean, I need to push the envelope as much as anybody else, but I don't want her to be disruptive and have people feel like we're distracted because of, or have you go down the same way I'm going down.
Like the next meeting.
Yeah, that's
That's
Good
right.
point.
It might bring some levity.
Uh-huh.
That is true. Now, I will say, with that, could we have planned intervals of breaks? Because we do have
Thank you.
motherhood challenges.
Oh, no.
It's old lady.
That's never.
I'm just gonna add, something to chew on for the next meeting. Something we used to do when we would have extremely long meetings or ones we knew were going to last all day was potentially before the meeting started, putting in a lunch order and,
Yeah.
saying, hey, we want to do lunch at 12:45, whether it's, Potbellies or whatever. And so we've got a planned
Yeah.
lunch period so that we're not stuck in the middle of the day going, oh my God, what are we gonna do to eat?
Right.
And I could always pick it up, but having that set before the meeting starts, that if we want to have a lunch at 12:30.
And even the people who are coming in for the hearings, for them to know it as well.
Yeah, so, starting off saying, the commission's planning on taking a lunch from 12:30 to this time or whatever it may be, but that way I can get the order put in, because it may take them a couple hours to process it.
Yeah. Can we just plan on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I can forward you guys some options.
Bellies is good with.
Do we just
And
put
some
on
of
money
the
in a-
group order, so you might not have to exactly
individually,
pay
like
or
each?
full order or, deal with the details of our
Oh,
orders too.
I mean, we can do it however. just kind of running it.
Everybody, well,
You
people.
know, and then
Bring it 20.
everybody just.
Yeah.
Bring it 20.
Okay, that's fine.
I never carry cash, so someone may spot me.
Oh, I can spot you. I always have.
But I always pay back.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Well,
Usually I don't have cash.
yeah, see, I never have cash.
Everybody hide a 20 in your wallet today. So
Yeah.
that when we ask for it next month, you'll be like, oh, this is why that's here.
Yeah.
So prior to the next meeting, expect an email from me that'll have their menu. Just let me know what you would want off of that, and we can get an order placed that morning. then.
Thank you.
Cool.
And a reminder of the EEO.
Yeah.
I will gladly send out another friendly reminder with a link.
I like the way you started that comment by saying it's just something to chew on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no pun intended.
He does stand up. on
Food for
Friday.
thought.
So,
I don't know if that was coincidence or
Yeah.
plan, but it worked well.
Coincidence. Happy accident.
so everybody,
I said gavel.
yeah, so, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Post same sign. Motion carries with the vote of 7-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, Madam Chair. Have a great day. Thank you. Yep. See you all next month.
Don't buzz too much.
You got it. You got it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, you drank the whole thing. Oh, you
Oh,
drank it.
no, total one. No, I didn't. I drank the whole thing. There you go. Yeah.